Good morning, a good Devach. Hope you all had a wonderful Shabbos. Parshas Mishpatim, Parshas Shkalim, the first ever Parshas Purim is on its way. We're Varchim Rosh Chodesh Adar on Tuesday and Wednesday. Habalina Latova. Today we are starting Maseches Beitzah. Today's shir is the Yuli Nishmas. Daru Nachum Misimcha Kohen Rishon Marchet Ben Shevsel Bracha Sarva Shmo Leib Binyan Moshe Ben Yosef Ben Rishos Lahav Aliyah. For Shlema for Adis Arbas Leach and a Pesel Basyenta, Yisrael Ben Rachale, Rachel Pas Pesel Zoda, Arab Yitzchak Ben Risha, Chayim Bas Dababela, for Shlema Besoch Shar Chol Yisrael, and as a schools for Naftali Tzvi Ben Rivka Blima, Aaron Levi Ben Arvam David Halevi, Shalom Yehuda Ben Chayasar Mindel, Shefer Bracha Vatzlacha Ben Ruchnis Gashmis and all their endeavors. Okay. Maseches Beitzah is 5 prakim. It's going to take us most of the week. And on Rosh Hashanah Friday, we're going to start Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah. The next few Masechtas are very, very short and will take us very quickly, Perek day obviously, until our Siyam of Seder Moed on Thursday, March 12th. Okay, so Beitzah is about Yom Tov. It's all about Yom Tov. And the differences between Yom Tov and Shabbos. Yom Tov includes includes the days which malacha is aser, meaning the first and last days of Pesach and Sukkot, Shavuos, Rosh Hashanah, as well as the intervening days of Chol Moed, where most malachas are permitted, subject to certain conditions. However, this Masechta is dealing with specifically with the malachas, with days that malacha is aser. We got Yom Tov days. Shabbos we dealt with already. Yom Kippur we dealt with already, and Chol Moed is going to be dealt with in Moed Kata. So we're familiar with malachas regarding Shabbos. But regarding Yom Tov, the pasuk says in Parshas Bo, "Kol malacha lo yasa behem ach asher yiachal l'chol nevesh hu levad yasa lechem." No malacha may be done on them the first and 7 days of Pesach. However, that which is eaten by any soul, that alone may be done for you. So with this pasuk, the Torah allows us to do malacha on Yom Tov for the sake of l'chol nefesh, for cooking food for human consumption. Then therefore we are allowed to light a fire, cook and bake, even carry food through the streets on Yom Tov. However, it's not so pashut. Not all malachas are permitted even for preparing food for Yom Tov. While you can shecht an animal on Yom Tov, it's forbidden to trap an animal on Yom Tov. Similarly, it's where you can cook fruits and vegetables on Yom Tov. It's usher to pick them on Yom Tov. And there's machlokas poskim between the Rishonim and the Gemara about like what is mutter Yom Tov, what's not mutter Yom Tov. That's what the whole Gemara is for. We also have the concept of muktza. Muktza is very common. It's not just it refers to all objects that the normal course of events are not expected to be used on Shabbos or Yom Tov, either because they were not fit to be used when Shabbos Yom Tov started, or because they were not allowed to be used, or because a person set them aside not to be used. So we're going to talk about that as well. For example, rocks outside are generally asur on Shabbos. If you decided before Shabbos you're going to use some of these rocks as paperweights because you're having an outdoor Shabbos party or Shabbos afternoon, you want to hold down the tablecloths, so you can pick up a bunch of rocks or stones and designate them as your paperweights for Shabbos Kodesh, and those would be able to be used, but the other ones that are still remaining outside in the yard would not. We had designated these for Shabbos. So what was the reason? The Rambam in Hilchos Shabbos, this is just ways of introduction into the Masechta. He gives three reasons for the isser of muktza. Muktza. You want number one, you wanted to make Shabbos special from the other days of the week, and if you were allowed to do everything that you could do during the week, then you wouldn't you wouldn't have Shabbos in such a high regard. And there are different categories of muktzah. A lot of it we already spoke about in Shabbos, but there's muktzah machmas gufo set aside because of what it is. But muktzah machmas kisar kiss set aside because of concern for monetary loss. Klish malach the iser, a utensil whose main use is usher on Shabbos and Yom Tov. And a basis of davar aser is a permitted object used as a base for prohibited object. And also nolad, where it is literally born on Shabbos Yom Tov, and you cannot, they were not prepared for the day before. Okay, let's get into this. Perek, Mesechus Beitzah, Perek Aleph Mishnah Aleph. Beitzah Shalom to Yom Tov. The first two chapters of this Masechta, 2 out of 5, record a number of malachas in between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel concerning Yom Tov. The first one is regarding to an egg that was laid on Yom Tov. It's a basic Shalom to Yom Tov. If an egg was laid on a Yom Tov that fell on a Sunday, Beis Shammai Omer Teyachal. Beis Shammai says that it may be eaten that day, even though the egg became complete the day before, which was on Shabbos, because it was fully complete the day before it was laid. Beis Hillel Omer Lo Seyachal. Beis Hillel says that it may not be eaten the day before because it was prepared for Yom Tov on Shabbos. And you can't benefit from what happened on the Shabbos for Yom Tov. Beis Shammai Omer or Bechazai. Beis Shammai says another machlokes that the smallest amount of sourdough that the Torah asks a person to own on Pesach is an owl's volume. This is for olive. The chometz bekikosevis. The smallest amount of chometz that the Torah asks a person to own on Pesach is a date's volume, which is larger than an olive. Beis Hillel says zev because both the sourdough and the chametz being, sourdough is a stronger form of chametz. So why the Torah mentions specifically sourdough? To teach that the amount of sourdough one may not own is different from the amount of chametz that person may not own. Since it's a stronger form of chametz, then you can own the issur is on a smaller amount. So Beis Hillel says that both the shiurim is a kazayis and the smaller amount is both of them. Mishnah Beis talks about kisoy adam. Hashochet chayev op yontif. The person wants to slaughter non-domestic animal or bird on yontif, meaning like it does not have any dirt prepared to cover the blood because you need to do a kisoy adam. Beis Hillel says he may slaughter the animal, dig up earth with a shovel, and use it to cover the blood. However, this is only allowed, according to Beis Shammai, if the earth is loose and the shovel was inserted into it before Yom Tov. Since it's already loose, moving it from the ground does not create a permanent hole, so it's not considered to be plowing. And since the shovel is already in the ground, it is not plowing even according to their abundance. It's fine on their isa, fine on their abundance. Beis Hillel says, "Lo yishchot ela in kein haya lo afar mucha v'bod yom." He may not slaughter the animal unless he has earth completely prepared from the previous day. It does not suffice to have loose earth into which a shovel is inserted, because clouds of earth that require grinding might still come up. Rather, the earth must be completely prepared beforehand, dug up, crumbled, and designated. However, Beis Hillel agreed that if you broke the laws and shechted an animal on Yom Tov without having prepared earth, he may dig up some dirt with a shovel and use it to cover the blood. Because if he says that the ashes, which may also be used for covering blood, they if they're left in a stove before Yom Tov began, the person may slaughter a non-domestic animal or a bird on Yom Tov and use the ashes to cover the blood, because the ashes of a stove are considered prepared for this use, even if he did not set them aside. Even if he did not specifically set them aside for this purpose, the person knows that before Yom Tov he can use the ashes in the stove for the mitzvah, they are not considered muktza, according to Beis Hillel. Mishnah Gimel, Beis Shammai says, the person may not move a ladder from one dovecote to another dovecote. That's where all the birds live, because he gives the impression he's taking the ladder to fix his roof, which is asur on Yom Tov. Shammai asks this even in private when no one sees him. However, he may tilt the ladder from one window of the dovecote to another window in the same dovecote, because in this case, it's clear he is not using the ladder for a forbidden purpose. Okay. Beis Hillel permit him to move a ladder even from one dovecote to another in private where no one sees him. Beis Shammai says, "Li tal ella imkein niyanam mibud yom." Person may not take doves from a dovecote on Yom Tov unless he had shaken them while it was still day before Yom Tov began, and thereby removed their muktza status. Beis Hillel say, Omed va'omer zeh v'zeh aninoto. Even if he stands and says, before Yom Tov, I will take this dove and this dove and that dove, he removes the muktza status. There's no need for him to shake them. Mishnah Dalet. Zimei shechorim u'matzah levein. If one prepares black doves in a particular compartment in a dovecote before Yom Tov, but on Yom Tov he found only white ones in that compartment, or if he prepared white doves in a particular compartment, but on Yom Tov he found only black ones there, or if he prepared the only two doves that were in a particular compartment, but on Yom Tov found three there, Asurim, in each of these cases, they are prohibited because they might not be the ones he had prepared. However, if he prepared three and Yom Tov found only two, they are mutter, because they are presumably two other doves that he had prepared beforehand. If he prepared doves that were inside one of the compartments, but at Yom Tov he found doves only on a ledge in front of that compartment and not inside of it, assume they're usher because they might not be the ones he had prepared. However, if there were no doves in the entire dovecote before Yom Tov except the ones he had prepared, and at Yom Tov he found doves only in front of the compartment and not inside of it, they are mutter because they are presumably the ones he had prepared in advance. Mishnah Hay. Mishnah Hay has four more machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel regarding a chedvan, a vendor's booth. Beis Shammai says, a misakin es hatrisin Yom Tov. The vendor may not detach the door from his booth on Yom Tov because that resembles the malacha of demolishing. And obviously putting the door back into place is also a malacha of building. And Beis Hillel matir and avla hachzir, where Beis Hillel permit him not only to detach the door, so he can sell items that will add to the joy of Yom Tov, but also to put it back in places in place after he has finished selling for the day. He's not allowed to put the door back. He might not want to detach it in the first place because he will then have to leave his booth open the entire day. Um, it is much to buy and sell food items and Yom Tov subject to certain conditions, which will be discussed in Perek Gimel on Tuesday, Rosh Chodesh. Beishamai says, "Ein notenes ha'eli lekatzif ala basar." Person would not take a large pestle, which resembles a thick, heavy board to chop meat on it, because it is muktza. But a Hillel permit a person to take such a pestle because so that he can use it to prepare food that will be eaten on Yom Tov. Beishamai says, "Hey, noticing that's or the hadarsan." A person, after a person slaughters an animal on Yom Tov, he may not put the hide in front of people who will trample it, which prevents it from decaying, because that is linked to the malacha of tanning. Lo yebihena ela im kain yesh ima kazayis basar. And because the hide is muktza, he may not even pick it up unless it has an ounce volume of meat attached to it. Permissible permit both activities because if a person is not allowed to prevent the animal's hide from decaying, he will not want to slaughter the animal in the first place, but then there will be less meat to eat on Yom Tov. And the fourth dispute, Beishamai says, that we may not carry a child, a lulav, or a sefer Torah out into a public domain on Yom Tov. Obviously, the lulav is referring to sukkahs, because this is an isser midiraisa of transferring of tzah, which is asur on Yom Tov for purposes other than preparing foods. You could carry out a brisket or flour, but you cannot carry out a child or a non-food item. The Beis Hillel permit carrying these items in the street because they maintain any malacha, you know, you know, that once the malacha is allowed for preparing food, it is also permitted for other purposes as well. Mishnah says, "Ein malich and challah or matanas to kohen b'yom tov." You may not bring challah or matanas to a kohen on Yom Tov, like truma or challah or those things. Whether they were separated the day before Yom Tov, it could have been given then, or they were separated on Yom Tov, it could not have been given before. Either way, you cannot give them to a kohen on Yom Tov. And Mistama also a Levi as well. Beis Hillel matirim, but Beis Hillel permit a person to give challah or matnas kohen on Yom Tov. In all cases, even if he could have given them the day before. Amar Beis Shammai said to Beis Hillel, Gezei Rashava. Our ruling is based on the following comparison: challah matanos matana kohen, l'truma matana kohen. Challah and matanos are gifts to the kohen, and truma is a gift to the kohen. Since they are alike in this way, then the law should be comparable. Kishem she'em alichin as a truma. Just as one may not bring truma to a kohen and not the kach em alichin as matanos, so too one may not bring the gifts of challah and matanos of a kohen on Yom Tov. Beis Hillel responded to Beis Shammai, no, you reject this comparison. Even if you say about truma that one may not bring it to a kohen on Yom Tov, that is only because one is not permitted to separate on Yom Tov, but only before Yom Tov, when the chiyuv to separate truma takes effect. Since the obligation to separate truma takes effect and must be fulfilled before Yom Tov, the obligation to bring truma to a kohen must also be fulfilled then and not after Yom Tov starts. How then can you say that truma is comparable to challah and matanos, which one is permitted to separate on Yom Tov? the chiyuv to separate challah and matanas does take effect on Yantif and may thus be fulfilled then. Therefore, it is also permissible to bring them to a Kohen on Yantif. Now we're going to go into the topic of tochen, of grinding. Mishnah Zion. Mishnah Zion. Beishamai says, Tavlin, Niduchim, B'maduch spices may be ground on Yantif only with a pestle of wood and not with the usual pestle of stone. Melech b'fach, with an eitz hapara, clumps of salt which could have been ground before Yantif without losing any flavor may be ground on Yantif only with an earthenware flask of a wooden mixing spoon, and not with a pestle of any type. Beis Hillel says, Tavlin niduchin kedarka b'madoch shel. Spices may be ground on Yantif in their usual manner with a pestle of stone, melech b'madoch shel eitz, and clumps of salt may be ground on Yantif with a pestle of wood, though not with a pestle of stone. Okay, Mishnah Ches. Haborer kitnis b'Yantif. One wants to select legumes and beans. So there's beans or peas from their shells on or other coverings on Yantif. Beishamai says, Borer ochel v'ochel. He must select the edible food from the waste with his hand and eat it right away. According to Beishamai, the malacha of Borer is asur Yantif. Therefore, they permit only this malacha, this method, which is not considered borer at all. Beis Hillel says that choosing beans is legumes is mutter Yantif. Borer ketarka. Therefore, one may select them in the usual manner by putting the mixture in a sheet on his lap and tilting the sheet, let the round legumes fall away from the waste. The kanun, by pouring the mixture through a funnel, so that the legumes which are smaller than the waist fall through the narrow end of the funnel. By putting the mixture onto a plate until you're shaking it, so that the round legumes roll off. I have a little bit tava, a little bit enough, a little bit kavara. One may not place the mixture onto a large board and gently tilt the board. They cannot strain the mixture into a fine strainer or in a coarse strainer. Those are used for selecting larger quantities, that even Beis Hillel asks a person to use them on Yom Tov, because it appears that if he is selecting food to be eaten after Yom Tov, which is asur, you can only do it for that day. Rabbi Gamliel says, you may even put the mixture of legumes and waste in a bowl, pour water onto the mixture causing the waste to float to the top, and then skim off the waste. Mishnah test. Two more to go. Test and yet. Beishamai says, manos. We may not send gifts to a friend on Yom Tov except for portions of food that are ready to be eaten as they are without any further preparation. So you can bring your friend like a meat or a cake or challah on Yom Tov for a bottle of wine, but it has to be cooked. Beis Hillel says, we may even set domestic animals, cows or sheep, non-domestic animals, deer or birds, whether they are alive or already shechted, although they require preparation before they can be eaten. We also send wine, oil, flour, and legumes. Beis Hillel did not consider it a problem that the recipient will set aside these items to be prepared and eaten after Yom Tov, since it's possible to prepare and eat them all on Yom Tov. One is allowed to send them. However, Beis Hillel agreed that we do not send raw grain, because it must be ground into flour before it can be used, and the malacha grinding is asur on Yom Tov. However, Rabbi Shimon allows sending even raw grain on Yom Tov because it can be cooked and eaten without being ground up. And finally, Mishnah Yud, Mishlichin, Kailin, Ben Tefurin, Ben She'ena Tefurin. We can send clothes, whether they are pieces of material that are sewn together and can be worn as a garment, or pieces of material that are not yet sewn together and can only be used as covers. Sending these items, these clothing is mutter, even if they contain a mixture of wool and linen, which may not be worn as clothing or even used as a cover. This is true only if the item is made of stiff material that provides no warmth, and therefore sitting or lying on it is not usher under the laws of shatnez. And all these articles may be sent as gifts because they are fit to serve a yontif's need. Meaning finished clothes can be worn on yontif. Unfinished clothes can be used as covers, and stiff shattered material can be used to lie or sit upon. However, other types of clothing that cannot be used on yontif may not be sent as a yontif gift. However, we may not send nailed sandals because wearing them on yontif is usher, because they might come apart. Below minal she'ena tafur, and we may not send shoes whose leather pieces were not yet stitched together because they are not wearable. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Aflo minal lavan." We may also not send white shoes. It means shoes that have not yet been blackened, because they need a craftsman to blacken them before they are worn, and so one would not wear them on Yom Tov when blackening is forbidden. So this is the rule kosher the osim bo Yom Tov v'shalchin osa. Any item that is fit to be used and may be sent as a gift on Yom Tov. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow for Perek Beis. Have a wonderful day.